Welcome to the Urban Complex, a system of interrelated, emotion-charged ideas, feelings, memories, and impulses. This name takes the definition and lays out what a listener should expect. A podcast where ideas, feelings, and memories collide, leading towards meaningful change. I'm co-host Chris Richardson. Please enjoy the journey with the Urban Complex. Smarter cities for a stronger tomorrow.
All opinions by Chris Richardson, Dominic Papa, and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Arizona State University or the Arizona Commerce Authority. Any endorsement of or messages from sponsors are solely supporting the production of this podcast. There is no relationship further than podcast purposes with any sponsor unless separately created with another entity.
All right, Chris, here we are. First episode of the Urban Complex after our quarterly recap, man. How are you doing?
No, I'm great. I was just listening to that episode as I was getting ready for this show. And, I was just reflecting how fun it is that we're kicking into new gear. I'm excited. We've got our first sponsor, Worldwide Technologies. Excited to work with David Stevens. I know we're starting to, he's a local guy we've known for quite some time. Used to run IT for Maricopa County. Just exciting to see what that's going to bring. Obviously, it's not going to be about them, but it's going to help us get more reach and more stories. And it's exactly what we had in mind. I think similarly, Cracks in the Pavement is getting some attention. We've got some secondary sponsors thinking about investing there, and hopefully we'll have some announcements on that too. So just really fun to see that. Although listening to the episode also makes me realize one of the only few downsides about living in Arizona, which is the allergies. So if anyone sees me snorting like I did in that episode during this, it's not because I got my kids a pot-bellied pig. It's me having trouble breathing. If anyone sees me with these red eyes, no, I didn't go visit Colorado and partake in their legal marijuana. I'm just the allergies are killing me. And it's just that time of the year, lasts for about a week, and then you're back to normal.
You're just crying because of all the great stories that we get to
Yeah. The other thing we talked about in the summary, where we're going, is this international flavor. And just it's exciting to have our first international guest. Dom, I know you know the gentleman. Why don't you share who he is and how you know him?
Yeah, Michael, who really heads up and leads the Smart Docklands program in Ireland, Dublin, Ireland. He's an amazing guy and an amazing leader. Everyone, I think, listening is going to really love him. We met at a Cities Today event. I believe it was in Chicago. And of course, like all these events, after the day of programming, we were able to do some networking. And I really sat down and dove deep into not only Michael as a person and his background, but also the efforts they were doing in Dublin at the time, which actually has its own unique regional approach that I think we'll kind of try to make him dive into a little bit here. But his experience, because his started way back in 2014, 2015, really helped us out in our own efforts as we were at the time trying to build a smart region program here in Arizona, in Greater Phoenix, Arizona. And so we actually took a lot of the hard lessons learned from Michael and what they did and actually imported it here in Greater Phoenix. So that way we could really just hit the ground running. So tremendous gentleman, tremendous leader, great stories. I think there's going to be a lot to be gained here for our audience.
Cool.
Excited.
I can't wait. Should we get him on?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right, Michael, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Yeah,
welcome, Michael. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
How you doing? How's everything going?
Going good, thanks. Going good. We're still in a lockdown in Dublin, so things are still quite tight here with COVID. But we are hopefully going to start coming out the other side of it now in the next couple of months. Everything's been very busy for the Smart City team over the last year. All of our work has really come into the spotlight and how much the city is changing. So it's been a very busy year for us.
Not to mention you didn't see it coming, so you have to prepare and adapt. Huh?
That's it. Yeah, that was a bit of a curveball. All right. Yeah.
Well, it's awesome. Thanks for joining us. You're our first international guest on the Urban Complex, so we're excited to have you. I know we go back a ways together, so we're excited to have you on to tell the story. about not only Smart Dublin, Smart Docklands, but also you yourself as a professional. So maybe before we jump into some of the great work you're leading over there, how about tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your background? How did you get to the position where you're at? Really tell us the journey, because I think a lot of our audience loves to hear about how people got to the position where they're at.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University College Dublin. I went into that course assuming that I would come out an accountant. I did all of the right courses to start my way on my accountancy journey. I spent a year with EY, Ernst & Young, and decided that wasn't for me. So I decided to change tact a little bit. I've always had a strong interest in kind of innovation and entrepreneurship. Started some small businesses in college and did, I suppose, different things in my early 20s. So my plan was to study innovation and entrepreneurship in a master's degree in Rotterdam. And during the process of that, I got involved with a gentleman who was setting up a thing called Startup Ireland. So we basically worked together on a concept of what Startup Ireland would be, which was to grow the startup ecosystem in Ireland, looking at other models, the Startup Communities model from Brad Feld and the Startup Delta model in the Netherlands. And trying to understand how we could implement that in Ireland, working in conjunction with the different pillars that you need. So you need people, you need funding, you need government, state agency support. So we trying to understand how we could create a stronger startup ecosystem in Ireland. There was a lot of really good stuff happening, and it was to try and join the dots, I suppose, and bring the community together a little bit. So in doing that, we got funded quite considerably for an event called the Startup Gathering. Our goal was to run 50 startup events in October of 2015 all across Ireland. So basically 10 in the 5 largest cities across the south of Ireland. So Dublin, Waterford, Cork, Limerick and Galway. During that process, we ended up getting quite a bit of government support from Bank of Ireland and other private sponsors, and we ended up running 412 events across the country in a week. So it was a massive success. We got a huge amount of support and a lot of things that were kind of happening in isolation. A lot of people came together. We got city coordinators in each city, and I suppose that was kind of. That kind of put us on the front foot, and we then attracted the Startup Nation Summit to Ireland for the first time, or actually to Europe for the first time. So that came in 2016 to Cork, and I, as part of that, still working with Startup Ireland, ran the startup event, which is part of it. So we were running an event called Startup Island in a disused prison off the coast of Cork. It's essentially Ireland's Alcatraz. In the middle of November, it was really interesting. There's some really good startups. Some of the startups have gone on to raise millions and have been quite successful. Actually, I'm not in any way saying that it was on the back of that event, but it's always nice to see people doing well. So, I mean, basically off the back of that, I ran that event. It all went well, and then I started running. I co-founded an event called Upstarters. It was a tech and startup recruitment event, and it was involved in a lot of startup stuff. So basically, all of that, I suppose, will give you a flavour of my background is in startups and in innovation and tech. And working with startups to try and create a community. So I kind of from that ended up getting involved in what is now Smart Dublin and Smart Docklands, mainly actually through a person that I used to work with within Startup Ireland introduced me to Jamie Cudden, who's the Smart City Programme Manager for Dublin City Council. And then, that's when Smart Docklands was then created.
That's awesome. And
all that starting from an accountant, huh? we had one of our guests recently, Brandon from Peachy Corner, started in the finance world too. So did you say earlier that Brad Feld was one of the models that you looked at for Startup Ireland? Yeah, the Startup Communities. Did you get a chance to meet him?
I didn't know. I've seen a lot of his stuff. I mean, obviously it's the stuff that I think a lot of countries and cities have tried to build on the Startup Communities work that he has developed. I've never met him. I'm not sure if either you guys have.
Well, no, he's actually good friends with one of my friends that lives here. Maybe I can see if he can make an intro to you. I can tell you love that startup world. And one thing I've seen from the tech view, Ireland had such a tech community already building of the corporations and building tech centers there. It's really makes sense that a lot of this started from the nucleus of the entrepreneurism side. We have Startup Phoenix and our Phoenix Startup Week and a lot of those ecosystems. Don often works at one of our tech centers, Galvanize. So it's really cool to hear that. Sorry to interrupt, but maybe I'll see if I can get an intro to you to Brad. I think he's
that'll be great. A lot of I suppose a lot of the basis of I suppose my journey now into smart cities has come from startups and trying to create, and in reality where it was startups and tech, and there was a lot of different type of tech, and so there might have been med tech, there was fintech, there was a lot of different things. It's now focused on kind of civic innovation and civic tech, but in everything that I did then, I do now has been trying to build a community or an ecosystem, or to play that facilitator role amongst a large group of people. So I think it's been I think the skills are certainly transferable.
Oh, totally. And I think this is going to be really exciting for our listeners, because I don't think to date that we've had someone really with the background around startups, and kind of tech innovation. And so this next question, I'm really interested to see, because we try to pose this to each of our guests, because we know, we're all in the smart city space. We know there is no definition of smart cities, but we love to really understand our guests' kind of view or approach to smart cities. And I'm really interested to hear yours, because again, I don't think we've had that kind of person with a background in startups. So please, explain to us kind of your view on smart cities, and maybe try your best to define it in your own words.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose how I would define smart cities would be, a smart city is a data-driven city. A data-driven city. So one where we make data-driven decisions, and that's not always data from CCTV cameras and sensors and other things. It can be soft data as well. So we, in the Smart Dublin and Smart Docklands programs, I suppose what we're trying to get to is a point, whether it's environmental data around flooding or air quality, or whether it's traffic, or whether it's just about how people interact with the city, trying to collect data from people, from sensors, and trying to collect people's opinions, which is as important data as anything, and to use that as a basis for decision making going forward. I suppose some people at times think that's a bit of an obvious approach. I think it is an obvious approach, to be honest with you. But if you speak to a lot of cities, that's not really how it works. There's a couple of people that have been working in a certain department for 20 years, and this is just the way it's always been done. So nobody uses the data that we're collecting and all the sensors.
That happens in Ireland too?
Yeah, I think that happens everywhere. So it seems, and maybe this is why smart cities are maybe coming of age and starting to be more successful. I think people, instead of it was very tech driven, as many people will know at the start, and it was very much, you've got to put all this stuff in your city, and then you'll definitely need it all, rather than looking at how your city, and just deploying tech for tech's sake. But if you try and understand what problems you face in the city, you collect data to validate whether those problems actually exist, and then going forward you can then build on those problems and address, because you validated a challenge. So whether that's air quality, we've had people in Dublin say we have challenges with air quality in certain areas of the city. The city can't really, or even the national government couldn't really act on that, because that's just a thought or an opinion. But if you can put some low cost air quality sensors out there, collect some data over a period of 6 or 12 months, then you have some real hard data. You can go back to the right policy committees or whoever it might be to make changes to affect that. So I think it's, maybe not to overthink it, but it's maybe as simple as just using data to make decisions in cities.
Love it.
Yeah. The next question, we want you to tell us about Smart Dublin, but this one, when Dom mentioned that you were going to join us, I got really excited, because my foray, I used to be at Honeywell for quite some time, and a lot of what we were doing was more the connected kind of connected home with our thermostats, connected cockpit with our airline vision. But it was working with Croke Park when I first joined at Arizona State that actually opened my eyes to the smart city movement. We had a donation from Intel to do some things in our stadium. And we were doing that. So I'm curious if in Smart Dublin you've worked with that. Bring it around to that in a minute. But just start. What is Smart Dublin? Help our audience know where that's going, and if you weave in anything with Croke Park, that'll be pretty cool to see.
Yeah, well, it actually played a really important part, Chris. So Smart Dublin was started in 2015. The concept of Smart Dublin, I suppose, again, was to use data to make better decisions in the city. It was on the back of a number of different things. So Maynooth University, which is a university in Ireland, had been working with Dublin on an open data portal called DubLinked, which we were trying to, and I think some smart city programs certainly started from the open data side of things, where they tried to open as much data to innovators in the hope that innovators would use it and they would transform it and come up with solutions for the city. That's maybe not how open data has really turned out, but it was certainly the dream at that stage. So there was the open data piece with Maynooth University, which was a large driver, and Dublin City Council decided to commit and hire a program manager to look at innovation in the city, which is Jamie Cudden, who I think you've met at Dom before. So Jamie's role was to set up Smart Dublin, and Smart Dublin has since then, so there's 4 local authorities in the Dublin region. So Dublin City Council is the largest one. It's the largest local authority in Ireland. And there's 3 surrounding local authorities, which is Dunleary, Rathdown, Fingal, and South Dublin County Council. So each of them, Smart Dublin is now made up of the 4 local authorities, and the idea is to get innovation across the whole region. So where you might have, a particular set of use cases in an inner city area or a central business district, in the more rural areas of the county or the coastal areas, you might have different challenges again. So trying to basically get the 4 local authorities working together to focus on innovation and technology. The Croke Park aspect that you mentioned, Chris, was a big part of it. So Intel played quite a big role in the establishment of the Smart City program in reality, and in turn Smart Docklands. So Intel, who I believe have a large presence in Arizona, and made quite a large announcement there. We thought the announcement in Ireland was big for 7 billion. I think your guys is 20 billion.
20 billion, yes.
Yeah.
They don't like when TMC is coming in their backyard. They're like, okay, you're going to do that, we're going to do this. So we'll see how it works out.
I think we thought we were doing really well with 7 billion until I saw that on LinkedIn. But so basically, Intel played a big part. I think we have a strong foreign direct investment agency in Ireland called the IDA. The IDA, I think, are one of the most successful foreign direct investment agencies in the world. And we've attracted the likes of Intel, Google, Facebook. Most of the big tech companies have a base in Ireland, in Dublin, and actually in the Docklands. But part of Intel setting up here was they wanted to be involved in connected cities piece and a smart cities program. So we started working with them. It was mainly to focus on rainfall and flooding and a couple of use cases initially. It like a lot of these projects, was kind of maybe tech focused at the start and not really focused on the problem we had in hand. So it was great to get us to a point. It got us, I suppose we had the kudos of working with a large multinational in the Smart City program. And from then, so that was 2015, 2016, the program was growing significantly. So it was Jamie and one other at that point in time in 2015. We now have about 25 full-time members of staff in the Smart City team across the 4 local authorities. And then we have 5 smart districts, which I'll probably speak a little bit about in a minute. So we have, and then there's a lot of people within the local authorities that are as part of their innovation team. So the innovation capacity in Dublin and the 4 local authorities has grown massively in that time.
That's amazing. Now, how is this being funded? You mentioned kind of the growth in just full-time employees. Are each of the authorities kind of funding their own positions? They just saw the benefit to this approach and just continue to kind of invest in personnel? Or is there a central financing mechanism as well?
There's not a central mechanism for financing. It's each of the local authorities, and it all sounds great now whenever we say that, that large number of how much it's grown in the last 5 or 6 years. In reality, it was a lot of like ad hoc and short-term decisions to get funding to get to where we are now. And I think sometimes when I speak to other cities, especially maybe slightly smaller cities, they look at us, they think you guys have got Google, Facebook, Intel, Microsoft, you've got them all on your doorstep and you've got all these people, it's easy for you. But it certainly wasn't like that in 2015, and there had to be a lot of decisions made. So, basically partnerships with universities and research and academia has been really important for the growth of the Smart City program. So I would say maybe 10 members of the team are part funded through universities, including myself.
Interesting. So which university funds you?
It's Trinity College Dublin, but it's through the Connect Research Centre. So,
gotcha. So it's really interesting as you're talking about this. Before we jump into Smart Docklands, how is the governing body of Smart Dublin? Meaning, do these cities all have like a board seat, and then does Jamie kind of help facilitate the governing body to kind of share back out and keep people interested? This just sounds like a lot of wrangling to keep the interest. And it's clearly going well if you've gone from 2015 to 25 now. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of wrangling is probably a good way of putting it, Chris. It's been, a lot of it has been.
We're cowboys out here in Arizona. That's what we think. So.
It's been, in fairness. So I suppose as it grew organically over time, Smart Dublin initially was just Dublin City Council, but to use the Dublin name and for Smart City activity to be happening in Dublin, in reality, you would need the 4 local authorities involved. So there was a more structured approach put on that in 2016, 2017.
It sounds like the Dublin brand was the umbrella, but others bought into becoming smart and getting involved in the movement. Does that kind of?
Yeah, and it's not. It's not equal across the 4 in the sense that they don't have equal resources. So there's a central Smart Dublin team now. So this has grown organically over time. There's been iterations during the last 5 years, but what we have now is a Smart Dublin regional manager, Alan Murphy. So he manages the coordination between the 4 local authorities to make sure that there's activity in them all. And if he sees something in Dublin that could be in Dublin City that could be working in Dunleary or Rathdown, he makes sure that there's people collaborating there. So I suppose it's up to Alan to make sure that there's activity in all of them. He works with the Jamie Cudden equivalent in each of the 4. So each of them have a Smart City Programme Manager. But to put that in context, Dublin City would be the biggest. Jamie has his team, and there's a team in Dublin City Council in South Dublin County Council, which is probably the smallest Smart City programme. The gentleman there has other roles as well as the Smart City remit within the council, within his local authority, and then the other 2, Dunleary, Rathdown, have a team and a Smart City lead, and Fingal similarly. So it's kind of, Dublin City is by definitely the biggest team. There's probably between 5 and 10 maybe in the Dublin City team, and then there's maybe 2 to 3 in the next group, and then in South Dublin there's 1 part-time person working on it, but with a lot of support from the regional team.
Yeah, no, and thanks for taking a step back for that. Sometimes our listeners, we just like to reiterate that this stuff didn't happen overnight, and to hear the story, because if they can kind of hone in, get their own start, they can actually catch up quicker. But it's important to see the big picture of how things got there and some of the nuances of how the coordination has to occur and how the buy-in. It's really
another big piece for Chris was there's been senior level buy-in across the board. So the 4 chief executives of the local authorities, which is the closest thing that we would have to a mayor in Dublin. We have a mayor in Dublin, and all local authorities have a mayor position, but it's a ceremonial position and it's not elected per se. So it's the chief executive of the local authority who's the kind of the head of that area. The 4 of them agreed to sign up to Smart Dublin, and the chair of the Smart Dublin steering group rotates between the 4. So they all take it on for a period of time, and then the chair will then work with the Smart Dublin regional manager, who works with the Smart City Programme Managers in each of the 4 local authorities. So that took a while to get there. It took a while to settle in, but I think it's a reasonably good structure now. I think it comes with its challenges as well. A lot of it's based on trust and just trying to get people to collaborate.
For sure.
And there was definitely a lot of people taking a leap of faith over the last couple of years to try and get it to where it is now. But I think it's got it to a good place.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, Chris. I don't know if that the story, Michael, and the framework that Michael just laid out sounds familiar. We based a lot of what we're doing here in the Smart Region, the Greater Phoenix Smart Region, with the connective around Michael's experience. So, Michael, I remember.
I had a funny feeling you must have gone to the pub with Michael, because I was like, I see where Dom got a lot of these ideas.
Well, I think we were at a Cities Today event in Chicago, or wherever we were, Michael, remember? And I was just picking his brain because we were just starting this kind of idea of bringing cities together around a smart region. I was like, oh my gosh, they've been doing it for so long. And so
definitely not in the pub. There's no pints involved whatsoever, Chris.
Let's bring it into Smart Docklands then. Tell us what how that works, what your role is, and some of the big things of how it fits in Smart Dublin strategy and where you're headed.
So Smart Docklands, I was hired on the 1st of April 2017. It was not an April Fool's party, so I joined the team, and the goal was to set up basically to look at IoT and connectivity and ecosystem in the Docklands. So the background to it, there was a number of things that happened. In 2015, Jamie Cudden had a coffee with a lady called Linda Doyle, who was at the time the director of the Connect Research Centre, which is Ireland's National Research Centre for Connectivity. It's probably one of the best connectivity research centres in the world. So Linda was the director at the time. She's actually just been elected to Provost of Trinity College, which is the head of Trinity College there just on Saturday at the weekend, which is quite significant. The first lady in the 429-year history of Trinity. But it's been great to work with Linda, and during that time, so Jamie had a conversation with Linda back in 2015 about we should do more between the city and the research centres. Come the start of 2017, they had formed what was called a targeted project, which is a 1-year project to look at IoT, an IoT ecosystem in the Docklands. There was also some research going on in the Docklands, around that area. The Docklands used to be, and is still sometimes known as Silicon Docks in Dublin, because there's so many tech companies there. So like Google employ 8,000 people in the Docklands, Facebook employ 5,000 people. We have loads of the tech companies there. Slack are based there, Stripe have an office there. There's a huge amount of tech companies there. But basically, on the back of all of those things, whenever I joined the team, the idea was to look at IoT and mainly look at low-powered wide area networks and IoT sensing. So my first piece was to manage the sensors that we had with Intel, which is 12 rainfall sensors. So it's grown quite significantly since the 12 rainfall sensors. What we quickly realized in reality was we needed to do more than just connectivity, and we needed to understand what the problems were. We needed use cases. So we kind of have 3 pillars that we work towards in Smart Docklands. So we have connectivity as the baseline. And that's obviously part of the funding of Smart Docklands at the start was from the Connect Research Centre. So there needed to be some research around connectivity. And the kind of concept was, if we had all the connectivity in the world, if we had Sigfox and LoRaWAN and narrowband IoT, and we had 5G and 3G and 4G and LTE and Wi-Fi, if we had it all there, would that really make a difference? And we started to...
Or just give you a headache.
Or just give us a headache, yeah. So we started, in reality, we did an audit of what we had. We wanted to work on getting more there, but quite quickly we were like, we have all the connectivity in the world, but we've got nothing to do with it. And to try and avoid getting into the place where it was tech for tech's sake, which had happened quite a lot in smart cities. Whenever, in reality, when I joined the team, I knew about smart cities. I didn't know a huge amount, if I'm honest. I came from a background of creating a community around startups and around tech. So that was kind of my focus. And I would like to think I brought that into Smart Docklands. So what we needed to build was more of an ecosystem in the Docklands. We now have about 200 different partners that we work with. Basically in that time, the idea was, can we have a baseline of connectivity? Can we then identify what the problems are that people face in the area? So let's run some challenge workshops to work out what those problems are. So in Smart Docklands, we have the 3 components: the baseline of connectivity, and then what we needed to understand was what the challenges were, and then we try and address those challenges with at times with technology, but maybe not with technology. So over the last number of years, our engagement program became quite important. We needed to understand who the main stakeholder groups were in the Docklands and how we could use and work with those groups to identify the problems. So we basically identified we had 4 main stakeholder groups. Those who look after infrastructure, so roadways, waterways, buildings, traffic lights, street lights, etc. The second group was property owners and developers, because the Docklands area is a strategic development zone for Dublin City Council, and there was a huge amount of building going on at the time with new buildings. The third one was residents, and obviously in no particular order. So we work with 6 different residents groups in the Docklands. So we have the North Docks and South Docks, and then within the Docklands, we kind of have 2 communities. We have the new community, the ones that tend to work in Google and Accenture and other places and live in the apartments. And then we have the older community. Traditionally, the families worked in the docks and would be more working class. We kind of have 2 different communities there. So we work with 6 different residents groups, which cut across both the communities. And then the last stakeholder group would be tourism and hospitality. So we have our National Convention Centre, our largest indoor concert arena, a lot of hotels, a digital museum. So basically we got the 4 of those groups. We ran a workshop with each of them, or a workshop with each of the first 3, and then each of the residence groups, we had their own workshops. And the idea was 15 minutes talking about technology and smart cities, and then the next hour and 45 minutes tell us all the problems that you face in your city. So definitely opened a can of worms. But I think it was really important for us. We were kind of, advised at the start, maybe let's just talk about smart city problems, but that's not really what I wanted to do. I think it was really important to tell us everything that you face, because if you go straight to what problems can technology solve, you'll only get some very limited problems. So what we wanted was to get as many as possible. So in our first year, I think we ran 10 or 11 workshops. We identified over 300 challenges, and basically we used those challenges as a basis for the Smart City programme in the Docklands. So to give you 2 examples here, one would be we identified some specific challenges that we just needed to address and could address. So one of them is ring buoy theft. So we have hundreds of ring buoys around Dublin, and there was about 25 to 30 of them being stolen every week in Dublin. So we basically were told about this problem during a workshop. We did a bit of investigation. We realised there's 500 stolen a year in Dublin City alone. It cost the City Council €20,000. We then realised this is not isolated. We live in an island. There's a lot of water here. So this is not an isolated issue. So we started talking to other local authorities and realised that it was quite a big problem. So since then, we have I suppose, a long story short, got some funding to develop an innovative method of procurement. It's the first time it's ever been used in Ireland, where we have put a call to the market to ask people for a solution to the problem. We seed fund 4 projects, so we give them all €10,000 each. They have to develop a solution and put it out for 9 months, and at the end of 9 months, we can make any of the 4, so up to 4, successful. And then they're now on a framework, or they will be on a framework come September time. And we got 21 local authorities to buy into the framework. So basically in doing that, if we as Dublin City, there's a couple of important pieces there. If we have Dublin City just put out a tender for that, it would only have been a tender worth maybe up to €20,000 a year, which is probably not really a big enough market for a company to go and develop a solution. But we got 21 local authorities, so the market became a whole lot bigger straight away. So it was much more useful for the startups to start to develop a solution, because there was a pre-made market there for them, which I suppose is kind of where my background came from, trying to create the opportunities for startups. It was taking a similar approach there to try and create an opportunity with 21 local authorities rather than just 1. Also, Dublin City Council has the resources, so they had the time and legal support and whatever else to develop the framework. And then the other local authorities who might not have as much resource, they could just put their name to it, and then they can avail of it without going through their own tender process and their own RFT. So that's one example of something that came out of a workshop. A second example would be, rather than a specific problem, it's kind of a general theme. So cycling is a big challenge in Dublin, and safer cycling. So we could see about 20 to 25% of the things that were identified in all of our workshops were around cycling. So we've had a number of different basically ways of identifying solutions to safer cycling over the last few years. We had an SBIR challenge, which is Small Business Innovation Research, which we worked with 4 companies, one of which developed a smart bike light that can map potholes and near misses in dangerous areas for cyclists in the city. So we've actually used the data from that to change the plans and road plans in the city. And then we've also put out cycle tech challenges. So we've just launched Dublin Cycling Buddy, which is an app for people who are starting to cycle and gives them the safest route, the greenest route, or the fastest route. So you can choose whichever you like, but the safest route will bring you around proper cycling infrastructure rather than on roads that don't have cycle lanes. So I suppose that hopefully that gives you a flavour of through the workshops, we kind of have specific problems we address, or else a theme of problems that we address, like cycling.
Hey, so one thing before we kind of shift gears, of course, Murphy's Law, you start talking connectivity. We had a quick pause there, and I'm a little worried. You talked about 3 pillars, and I'm not sure I heard the third. So you talked about connectivity, the community stakeholder piece. I'm assuming those are 2 of the pillars. What was the third?
The third one was the use cases. So basically, when we have the connectivity there, we then identify what the problems are, and then the third pillar being the project.
So the overall, how the workshops led into the outcomes.
Yes. So the workshops identified those 300 problems or 300 challenge statements. We sometimes went to the market looking for solutions, and then at times, sometimes the market, as you will know, will come to you and say, "I have this great thing, I want to do it." Well, we want to roll it out in Dublin. What we wanted to make sure was we weren't just, it wasn't just technology for the sake of it. So at times, if we knew the problem existed, then we could match it to, if somebody comes with a solution, we can say, well, actually that problem does exist. We've had 25 reports of it in the last year. Then we can validate why we're actually going to trial that solution.
And that's that entrepreneur's mindset. It's like building the customer empathy that then drives where the solution is, finds the right solution, and turns it into something that relates. So that's great.
Yeah, and I think I just want to hit on another point that you mentioned is this idea of aggregating demand and creating the market that incentivizes startups to really get engaged in the smart city space. So often you hear a mayor or a city manager say, I want to engage our startups in this. I want to engage our startups. How do we activate the ecosystem? It's working with one government alone is very, very difficult. There's not a lot of an incentive for a startup who's got to live day by day by day by day to spend so much time trying to work with the city, one city to help solve a problem. But if you aggregate demand, if you create that marketplace by working together, creating scale, you're more likely to incentivize those startups. Is that what I mean? That's
absolutely it. Yeah, and I mean it's a two-sided thing as well. So if we there was only 1 or 2 solutions on the market before we started this, and they weren't very good and they were very expensive. So we were never going to buy something because there wasn't anything good enough out there. It wasn't using IoT networks. It required connectivity with power or SIM cards. It was all very costly. So on both sides, on one side, we created a market for the startups. And then on the other side, for the local authorities, we created enough demand that there was new solutions came to the market. And I think it's worked really well for us. It's the first time we've ever done it. It's the first time it's ever been done in Ireland. We're actually working with Amsterdam and 3 other cities now. We've put in a bid to start a startup in residence program, which will use the same, basically the same concepts. And what we basically want to do is, can we identify, maybe it's just in Dublin and the 4 local authorities, maybe it's across Ireland, or maybe it's across Europe. Can we identify common problems and common themes that if Dublin looked after the one on, last mile delivery in the city, and if Amsterdam looked on, small cells and 5G in the city, if everybody took those problems and they did the trial period, but what you got out of it was a lot of solutions that would be beneficial for all at the end. And I think, the big thing, as you will probably know, writing those tender documents and going through public procurement, public procurement stifles innovation. I don't think anybody shies away from that. It really, really slows things down. And if you can work on ways, we don't want to just get rid of public procurement. It's there for a reason. And we have to make sure that, we're adhering to the right rules and regulations, but we also want to find ways of getting innovation into the city. And it's really difficult to work with local government as a startup. It's so slow. It's just a very challenging thing to do. By the time you will actually have got that contract, your startup probably gone out of business because it took the city 2 years to decide whether they were going to give it to you.
Yeah.
I hate to bring you out of the procurement, but I do think if you're looking for two charismatic gentlemen and you need a podcast to be representing your startups and residents to come out to Ireland, I bet you know where to go. We can help interview some of your startup ecosystem and bring those.
Yeah, we should definitely do that. I mean, it would be great. I think maybe to build on that a little bit, Chris. What we discussed earlier was where Dom and I met at the Cities Today events, and there's events like that. And as you know, Dom, whenever you go to those events, you get so much knowledge from listening to other people in other cities and how they do things. And, just by people telling their stories, you get little snippets of what you could do in your city. And it's the same with solutions that you get. And sometimes, it can be, things can be quite salesy, but if you can get it to a place where, you can share success stories and failures amongst cities, I think that will be a really good place to be. And I think obviously this possible podcast.
And seeing it. I bet you seeing some of this stuff that you've done and being part of one of these community discussions would open people's eyes in another way too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we actually, I suppose on that, we haven't done it since COVID has been around because we haven't been in the city centre, but we started a Smart Docklands walking tour about two and a half years ago. It sounds maybe more exciting than it is. I'm not sure if it even does, but essentially we, in one city.
It's not a pub crawl, huh?
You don't actually pass any pubs on the way. So on one city block, we basically wanted to show real life smart city technology in action. And I suppose, I don't know, I kind of like to think of a success of a smart city is whenever you don't actually see it or know about it or think that it's there. So, people will, they go to London, they use their Oyster card and they'll get on and off the tube with their contactless payment card. People will just get on bike sharing schemes and e-scooters. And so I actually, got questioned quite a lot at a conference one time about, when will we ever have these smart cities? We're miles away from having a smart city. And I asked everybody in the audience to put up their hand for who had a bike sharing scheme in their city. And almost everybody put it up. And then I said, who's actually used that bike sharing scheme? Almost everybody kept their hand up. And I said that's a smart city. That's technology being used in a city. So that, it's great that you don't think it's a smart city. You actually just think that's business as usual or normal in your city now. And that's kind of where we need to get to. So the purpose of the Smart Docklands tour is to show people 7 different types of smart city applications that are there, that are functioning in the city with things like 5G small cells. We have rainfall sensors. We have a radar sensor that's detecting cyclists coming towards a traffic junction. And if the cyclist is basically too far away for the red light, the green light will extend for up to 3 seconds if it can detect a cyclist, to let the cyclist through safely and then change the light. So we've 7 different things, and the big belly bins is obviously a thing that we use quite a lot in Dublin as well. So we've 7 different things in that city block that we just show people. Most of them would never identify them as smart city applications, but I think that's kind of what we're trying to highlight, that once you don't consider it a smart city application, it's probably become successful.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important point, not only to, I think, build awareness, the smart city program for residents, but also to your point about executive level support, right? Sometimes you get a new city administrator, a new mayor that comes in and says, why aren't we a smart city? What are we doing? And if you can't guide them through, what is already happening, it's hard to get that. They want the shiny object, like this has, the bright lights and big pictures, but sometimes it's, to your point, I love that idea about, do you see the bike sharing? That's a smarter city, right? It's those things you need. Feeling.
Yeah, balancing that, that the glossy success stories of smart cities and, the reality of them is important because, most smart cities or most programs in reality, whether it's a government funded program on smart cities or anything, won't get to the next stage unless you have that glossy marketing. So it's part of the process. You've just got to make sure that it's not your entire process. So, we made a decision at the start of Smart Docklands to only talk about things that we have actually done, not things that we could do. So the main reason being, there was a lot of companies talking to us at the time about, let's do this great thing with 5G in your city, and let's do this about smart street lighting, and let's do all of this. And there's a lot of cities will, in their glossy brochures talk about all these great things that they could do, but it never really happened. So my kind of rule of thumb was, if we can't take a photo of it in Dublin, we didn't do it. It didn't happen, and we can't talk about it, which was really difficult at the start because we didn't have much to talk about. but it got us good momentum quite quickly, because then we had credibility whenever we did show. So if we can show real photos and videos of things actually in Dublin, whether it's a dashboard of data flowing from a rainfall sensor, or whether it's, you know, a smart building, so Accenture have a connected building in the Docklands, that wasn't anything that we actually did, but it was in the Docklands, and they were happy for us to tell their story about the sensors they were using in the building. And I think that's, you know, another maybe important thing that we've got out of Smart Docklands is we don't always have to just talk about the stuff that we have done. If there's other good things that are happening in the city, we're happy to share those stories as well, providing it's related to smart cities or IoT in some way.
That's awesome. Oh man, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours. We appreciate it, Michael. Before we kind of have some standard questions to close, but before we do, I have to bring a story back. Again, you know, we met at the Cities Today event, probably having a couple too many drinks, talking about, you know, all our passion for smart cities, and we started talking about. You brought up this concept around boundary spanners. You know, and I became fascinated with it. Brian Dean, you know, my co-founder of the nonprofit at the time, we became fascinated with this concept. You've got to tell the audience what a boundary spanner is and kind of how it fits into the smart city idea. Yeah.
So it's probably not the most endearing term, and to be called a spanner doesn't sound great. But I suppose the crux of a boundary spanner is somebody who breaks boundaries, and in reality is a broker or a facilitator of conversations. So it's not necessarily a new concept, but maybe a new concept in cities and in local government. So for somebody to be on the edge of local government that also talks to industry, that also talks to academia, that talks to residents on an equal footing, is probably quite a new role. And for a city or for local government to be that open to that is quite a new role. So as Smart Docklands, we act as facilitators in conversations. So at times it could be working with a property developer who's just developed a 3D model of a new building, and we can put it into our Smart District 3D model and use it for visualizations. It could be any number of things, but, you know, we've come across, you know, we now, you know, since setting up, we've got involved in things like 3D modeling for the district. We've got involved in smart tourism, which we now have a smart tourism program manager. You know, there's been a lot of things that would have only happened if we were basically open to conversations and open to collaboration. And you know, collaboration, I think collaboration is just the most important thing in all of this. And when I say collaboration, I don't mean you know, collaboration in the sense that people say, oh, we collaborated with these guys. There's a lot of people talk about collaboration, and it's not true collaboration. I mean, true collaboration is, you know, sitting in a room, letting your guard down and be willing to be wrong in a conversation and be willing to listen and to be willing to work things out. So in that, you need an appetite for risk. Risk is not something that local government tend to be associated with. So to be able to sit in a room and say, we actually don't know what we're doing here, we've no idea how to make that smart, or we've no idea how to do this, and then to say that publicly to companies and to industries and research, and let them come back with solutions, and then have an iterative process, you know, going forward, that's to get to a solution that works for both sides. That's true collaboration, and I think that's where we've got to in Dublin.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I'll just say, you know, on the podcast, we've had kind of smart city managers from other cities around the US so far. And while we didn't term it boundary spanners, it seems that that's the kind of the most appropriate type of person to really help lead your smart city efforts. It's this person that can, you know, facilitate the conversation, that can translate, that, you know, that can be that translator between.
Yeah. And you've probably seen that. Sorry, just to cut across you, Chris, you've probably seen that in you know, in the personalities involved in smart cities. So we've been at the Cities Today event, the Harvard City Innovators Forum events. The personalities involved in those events and the people who turn up time and time again are in reality a type of person, which is, it's maybe a bit unfortunate that it comes down to personalities rather than, but reality being those type of people are really open and willing to listen to others, listen to other people's ideas, and then try to see how they can apply it to their own world. And I think the people that are willing to do that have been quite successful. You know, we set up our Smart Docklands program. We set up in 2017, we now have 5 smart districts in Dublin, and it was really important that the program managers of each of them have that kind of boundary spanning mentality, because what you're trying to create in every new district is an entirely new community and ecosystem of people that you're going to work with, whether it's focused on tourism or health and well-being or whatever each district is focused on. It's important to have that kind of personality trait. So I think it's been really important to, even when you're hiring and when you're trying to look for people in smart cities, it's really important to have that personality trait.
Yeah, really important. And it's got to be real. I love your quote. If you can't take a picture of it, it didn't happen. Some of the stuff with the right personality, they're talking so high level, it's not actually getting done. So it's a mix of the right personality, the doer mentality, bring the people together, show something, keep iterating. Yeah, that's great. Dominic, we could have you on for quite some time. We'll have to do it in person. We've been saying this. We can get back on the road. I know you're looking forward to Ireland, open up a little bit more. But as we close, we know you can't do it alone. And I'm curious, if there's anyone that you want to show appreciation to that's helped you kind of morph into this new role. And similarly, they might not be the right person. You never know. But is there anyone that you think should be on the show, knowing about us and what the urban complex is about? Plus, we want to see more of those international stories. So is there anything that you can help our audience understand about how you got your break and or who we should have on the show?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal perspective, I mean, there's a couple of people that it simply wouldn't have happened without. Jamie Cullen is a Smart City Programme Manager for Dublin City. The job wouldn't exist for him, and his approach and mindset and the way he works within the local authority, and in reality how he represents Ireland internationally. So he's played a massive role. Two other people who played quite a big role at the start and continue to: Linda Doyle, who I mentioned earlier, who was the director of Connect and is now the head of Trinity College in Dublin. And then another gentleman, Paddy Flynn, who is now the director for geodata operations in Google. He also heads up the Google for Entrepreneurs program in Ireland and the Adopt a Startup program. So he kind of wears his Google for Entrepreneurs hat when he's talking to us. But the three of them kind of came up with this concept at the start and have been instrumental. I'd be here all day if I mentioned the amount of people that have played a role to get it to where it is. And I genuinely really would. There are hundreds of people, and it's very difficult to, whenever I get up and I often speak at events and I get to show all the nice stories of all the successes, but there's so many people behind it that have played such a massive role. So I mean, obviously Dublin City Council funding it, and Connect Research Centre and the Enable Research Book funding the programme have been massive. But Jamie, Linda and Paddy Flynn have been very important in my certainly in my Smart Cities career to date. In terms of other cities, I suppose there are a couple that are doing really interesting things. One is a gentleman called Andre Costa in a city called Aveiro in Portugal. So I met Andre, it must be 2018, and they were having an event called Aveiro STEAM City, or Aveiro Tech STEAM City. And I was speaking at the event as a kind of an international perspective on smart cities. The day before I arrived, they actually got funded for their smart city program. So they were kicking it off that day, basically. And their mayor was there to launch it. It's a city that's about halfway between Lisbon and Porto. Apart from the fact that it's absolutely beautiful, and if you ever go to Portugal, you should definitely go there. They're doing a really good job in terms of smart cities. So, I went there in 2018 and they hadn't really started anything. They were literally just launching it that day, and it was a concept. They now have, and the kind of their main thing was they lose people to Lisbon and to Porto all the time. There's a big brain drain in a city the size of Aveiro, because each of those cities is only an hour away, so people just leave and go to the big cities. But actually, they have the likes of Altice, who are a big mobile network there. They could and should be doing a lot more. So they've basically created a whole, basically a pipeline of you have new university courses in their university. They now have jobs with Altice and new startups. So they did a similar type of thing where they've created markets and created opportunities for people to stay in Aveiro and start companies, create new jobs. And they're doing things around 5G, around IoT, around green energy, and it's all happened in the last less than 3 years. So I think Andre's done a really, really good job. Definitely a good person to get on the podcast. I mean, there's been plenty of other people. Franz Anton in Vermaast in Amsterdam has been a massive help to us in Dublin, giving us a lot of guidance. Eindhoven played a big role in the start of our program as well. There's a team of people in Eindhoven who have done a really good job. At the minute, we're working with Anne McLister in Glasgow, who would be definitely worth chatting to. Anne is kind of leading the way in telecoms in Europe. Really, in the minute, they've set up a new telecoms unit, and it's kind of defining how a lot of cities in Europe will look after 5G going forward. So she's done a really good job there. And then Julie Snell, I'm sure you've met Julie, Dominic, who used to be the head of Bristol Smart City Programme at Bristol is Open, is now the head of the chairperson of the Scotland 5G Centre, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Julie's done a huge amount in the last number of years since I've known her, and they've played a massive role in the establishment of Smart Docklands as well. So that's a few people that would definitely be worth chatting.
We've got our homework. We'll have to get some introductions.
Yeah. Well, Michael, again, thank you so much, not only for coming on to the podcast and telling your story, but truly for being an inspiration, for being a boundary spanner, and inspiring a lot of the work that we've done here in Greater Phoenix. We've modeled a lot after what, all the success that you've had in Dublin and the work you're doing. So thanks for being that boundary spanner, that great leader, and of course, coming on to the urban complex and telling your story. We really appreciate the time, and I'm sure we're going to have you on again to really deep dive into some of the projects.
No problem at all. Thanks very much for having me, and hopefully we get a beer in Dublin sometime soon.
Yeah, my fingers are crossed.
Entrepreneur in residence, here we come.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Michael.
Thanks, guys.
Great. All right, Chris, that was Michael all the way from Dublin. What'd you think?
Well, besides that, we need to get out there. I do have Irish roots, and I love Guinness. Love what I've heard of the culture. Besides getting out there, oh my gosh, you can tell he deeply knows what he's doing, and he's really spent the time to do so. But the thing that stuck out to me is that here we are. The thing that made me and a lot of ASU's focus on Smart City and what is Dublin's Smart City program impetus is the same thing: a public private partnership. Intel tech company. They start with, unfortunately, the tech for tech's sake. But that was the impetus that got it going. For us, we did this joint partnership. It was already moving before I got to ASU, Arizona State. But Croke Park, which is the large stadium at Dublin City University, and ASU and our stadium, and Intel said, we're going to put sensors in these stadiums, and we're going to focus on different aspects. For ASU, it was how do we create fan engagement? And for those that have been to a football game at ASU, as far as we know, we are still the only stadium in the world that has real sound and an interactive game with the fans to highlight which section's loudest of any sport. That happens, but it's fake data. And that's what started our Smart City journey. And then you hear how the Intel investment was their start in what became Smart Dublin. I don't know, and that interactivity with the university, you could just tell his appreciation that was the impetus, and that look what it led to. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we've heard this over and over. Just get started. Yeah. I mean, we all like to look back. Hindsight's 50-50 or whatever they say. 2020. We all like 2020. Sorry. But we all like to look back and say, oh, that started as tech for tech's sake. Well, they got started. And yes, you can obviously adjust and pivot and actually correct as you move, but you have to start, right? We've heard this over and over. So I think that's a great point. And sometimes, yes, we need a private partner to come to us to really get us moving.
Well, look at Intel too. Like they had kind of missteps, and now they're waking up. And he even recognized in Ireland the things they're doing here in Arizona, investing $20 billion in our backyard to kind of build the next generation of chips. That's what it is. You keep trying things, you keep learning and going after it.
It woke them up. It woke us up, right? It started us on our journeys, and
here we are. We're talking to them, and it's funny how it brings back. The second thing that I really being an entrepreneur, finding the fit for this podcast, and I've started some companies in the past and got a couple tricks up my sleeve. We'll see how that works in the future. Like, you just tell this guy is doing something very much like the way a tech entrepreneur starts something. He's finding a niche. He's building on it. He's bringing people together. He kept talking about community. And so his 3 pillars I thought were really interesting in where they led. The first being the connectivity. Again, he got kind of into tech for tech's sake, but he realized if you're not connected and you don't have the right partners and you don't figure out which of that alphabet soup you rattled off is going to help take you into this next era, you're irrelevant. So at least he started with the foundation. But then, like that whole 200 partners and bringing that community together and finding out who the stakeholders were that were going to be the spanners of the tech community, the large tech community, the universities, their group and the cities. Like they have to build that stakeholder community and find out where the fit is. And that was the last piece then, is how do you bring them together and have the right dialogue that has the willingness to take the risk and not know the answers, not lead with tech, and ultimately come to solutions. I thought those 3 pillars were really key. And I think how he approaches them and how he's enabling their network of cities to approach them and how he's allowing the procurement channels to bring that in. Like, it's just, it was pretty cool to hear such a deep thinker and what's moving.
Well, yeah, I especially for our audience that are, maybe city administrators looking to deploy or develop their own smart city program or initiative, that was a perfect framework for how to easily structure your own program in your own community, right? Number one, baseline of connectivity. You have to make sure connectivity is there so the solutions that you deploy, can run on top of it. But then 2, what are the challenges, right? Go engage the community and actually develop, identify those specific challenges. Then I think there's a 2.5 there, is identify those challenges, but then investigate to make sure they're actual challenges, right? Because sometimes you're just hearing opinions. So I think I loved when he said, go actually investigate to make sure it's a problem. And then yes, partner to deploy the solutions, pilot it, test it, and then figure out how to procure it, right? So it very, very easy to understand pillars, but I think it's great advice for any of our city leaders looking to set up their own programs in their own communities.
How about you? I mean, you knew him, you've met him, you've talked about some of this stuff. What resonated to you as you had him back first time in a while?
Man, you could tell why I was so excited to have him on the show, and you could tell how excited I was to first meet him. I mean, I have another notebook of full pages from that. I really thought 2 very interesting things that I want to highlight. One is this idea of cities can actually help drive the tech market. I mean, when we have a challenge we cities have challenges and we actually put out demand signals to industry, we can actually help move where tech is going, right? As he mentioned, they had a challenge around cycling. They got cities together that all had the similar challenge, and they didn't like the off-the-shelf product, right? There was, I think what he mentioned, 2 products, and they weren't going to procure them because they didn't think it met their need. And so what did they do? They got together and said, this is our challenge. Help us develop a new solution, right? They actually put a demand signal out for new tech, and they were actually able.
Well, and they listened to what was important to the citizen along the way.
Totally.
So with the demand signal, they actually solved something, bring people together, and everyone sees how their contributions led to something that gave them a better outcome.
Exactly. So they aggregated the demand, right? The demand being the public sector, the cities, and then the cities put out their own demand signal and said, bring us the tech, develop the tech. And we'll deploy it, right? So I really love this idea of cities driving tech through demand signals, right? You've got to put it out there. And then lastly, I just love this idea of the smart Docklands walking tour, right? So many times, I think this goes back to our joke around there is no smart city definition. You're not going to wake up one day and your city's just going to be smart, right? You have to reiterate what is actually going on in the city to people, to mayors, to whoever it may be.
Or their mantra, if you can't take a picture of it, it didn't happen.
Right? But yes, I mean, things as simple as bike share or using a mobile app to pay for your parking, those are tangible examples of your community actually working in a smarter way, right? But sometimes if we don't have a tour where we can touch it, feel it, look at it, we don't think it's there. We don't think our city's a smart city. So I love that idea of them actually developing a walking tour where there's the 5G, there's the connectivity piece, there's the bikes, share and things like that.
I know 2 people when Dublin opens up that are going to raise their hand. They're ready for the smart city or the smart Dockland tour.
Exactly. So just love having Michael. Hopefully there's a lot of golden advice there for our listeners. I'm excited to have him back on. And I love the idea of a boundary spanner. So
and he asked for questions. So when we release on social, hopefully anyone listening that feels free to share their questions. I know he wants to answer. You can just see the passion. He wants the movement to continue. He wants to learn. Share what you're doing in your cities and tag him in it. I think that would be a big win for everyone.
Exactly. So what do you think for cracks in the pavement? You have anything good today?
There's an article I saw back in March that's just been ringing with me. And when we did our recap and we're hearing Michael today, that just kind of rings. I'm going to kind of take a quick look so I don't mess it up. But it literally, the headline is only 7% of companies have digital savvy leadership. And, I just think what's so important about that is again, what Michael said today, you can't go in with all the answers. We've heard that with Mayor Daniels. You start with a beginner's mind. And doesn't mean if you don't have a digital savvy leadership today, you can't have one tomorrow. You need to help people understand, be educators and raise the bar for everyone. And then you get what Emily Yates was talking about, which is you can start to help everyone have the mindset. And it doesn't need to be digital savvy. Doesn't mean you are the expert to know all those connectivity types that Michael shared today. It just means you know how to find ways to move things forward and innovate and continually improve. That's, what's really interesting. So I guess the message here is don't feel you have to retreat and be afraid and be a technophile. Lean in and learn what you can do and what you can learn and find and share and talk, and that, find a person that you can discuss this stuff with and go to lunch. And that to me is just a great article.
No, it is, because I think it's a definite crack in the pavement, especially with cities, because what they said, organization and companies, but cities too. I would be very interested to see if they surveyed cities, how many percentage of city managers or mayors they, quote unquote, tech savvy. I think cities are the same way. They need to have these leaders that, yes, you don't have to be the systems engineer. You don't have to really understand it to the minute detail, but you've got to be that boundary spanner. You have to be able to have your door in the tech side, your door, your foot in the door of the tech side, the foot in the door of the academic side, your foot in the door of the city management side. I think that's a very interesting article. And one, especially as cities go on this digital transformation, we'll need more city managers, mayors that are quote unquote tech savvy. I think that's
and it's okay to not know, but also I think it's important to realize, if there's a CIO listening here, don't lead with the techno speak. Don't lead for tech's sake. Find the things that are going to relate that bring tech forward, but not are the tech. I think that's also the byproduct. I think some of the ways cities operate, that the CIOs like to kind of create this layer between them because they lead with technical speak. Their teams lead with technical speak. And I think that's its own barrier and why the digital savviness is. But when everything is becoming more and more technical, when citizens have more and more an expectation that the best technical experiences are their experience, if we don't get more digital savvy leaders, we're not going to innovate at the pace that our citizens, our customers are expecting of us. And I think that's, again, a theme that we need to help break through.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. And it'll be interesting to watch the progression of the percentage and see if, how quickly it increases, especially both on the company side, but also on the city side. So very interesting.
Cool. All right. Well, nice find with Michael. And I guess that's a wrap of the Urban Complex. Thanks all for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Urban Complex. Smarter cities for a stronger tomorrow. Please find us on where you listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. We do love your feedback. Let us know if you have ideas for guests or questions to air on Cracks in the Pavement via social media. The Urban Complex is found on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Or just shoot me an email, chris@theurbancomplex.com. Until next time.